What would you do if the police suddenly walked up to your front door or your car window? Could one wrong move turn a simple encounter into a life-altering disaster? What should you do, or more importantly, not do, to protect yourself from being arrested by overzealous officers who have already decided that you have done something wrong? I'm Jeff Hampton, a former prosecutor turned the people's lawyer. And if you're like me, you take your rights and preserving those rights very seriously. When police arrive unexpectedly, how you choose to respond could make all the difference between walking away or spending the night in jail. In this video, I'm covering 10 things not to do if cops show up. So stick around because the last one could have the most severe consequences. So let's dive in. Number 10, never refuse to roll down your window. Imagine this. You're pulled over for a minor traffic violation. The cop walks up to your window and you only roll down your window, maybe not even an inch. Now the officer demands you roll down your window. All of a sudden, tensions rise. The officer calls for backup. You refuse to roll down your window, and what started off as a simple traffic stop turns into a roadside conflict. I already know what some of you are going to say in the comments. Many of you are going to say, Jeff, it is completely within my rights to keep my window rolled all the way up, and there's no responsibility that I have to roll my window down at all. After all, it's your car, right? Now listen, I want to talk about practical things here that I've seen thousands, tens of thousands of police officers. I know exactly how they're going to react. So I want you to recognize there's a difference between what you perceive your rights to be and exactly what police officers are going to do on the side of the road. The problem here is that police can legally request to see your license and your proof of insurance in most states. Even if you choose to hold up your driver's license and your proof of insurance up against the window, I can promise you, not only will the officer demand you roll down your window, but tensions will rise and this situation will escalate very quickly. I know many officers in Texas and some other states will see your refusal to roll down your window as non-compliance, maybe even obstruction. But here's the real catch-all. Most police officers, if you refuse to roll down your window, particularly at night, they will now claim the dreaded officer safety is in place. They will claim that your attitude and your behavior place them in such a position that they reasonably anticipated that they may be in harm's way because now they believe you're making furtive movements, or maybe you're being aggressive and now they will demand you to get out of your car. I have actually seen cops break people's windows and force them out of their car for exactly this situation. So, what do you do instead? Roll down your window just enough to be able to communicate clearly with the police officer. If the officer asks for your driver's license and your insurance, provide it to him. Be calm, be courteous, and don't raise your voice. Remember, the side of the road is not the place to take a personal stand. Save your arguments for the court. Number 9. Never drive away without asking this simple question. Officer, am I free to leave? This simple question can save you from misunderstandings. You might think one thing, the officer thinks something else. The next thing you know, you're being arrested for evading arrest. In fact, cops can be really bad about keeping you on the side of the road for a ridiculous amount of time. Never assume that the officer is done with his investigation and drive away. Why? Because assuming you could leave on your part puts the officer in a place where he could now have a power trip and decide he has all the justification he needs in order to arrest you for evading arrest. In fact, in United States versus Mendenhall, the United States Supreme Court noted that a person is, quote, seized only if in view of all the circumstances, a reasonable person would believe they are not free to leave. By asking if you are free to go, you are clarifying the situation and protecting yourself from legal trouble. Number 8, never refuse to leave after being ordered to by the police. Just leave the scene and fight the issue in court. I get it. Being told by police that you must leave a location where you feel you have every right to be at can feel unjust. Maybe you're just standing on a public sidewalk, or maybe you're at a public park before closing time. An officer walks up to you and demands that you leave the scene because of what someone else said. You know that's unjust, so you refuse. This is completely unfair and cops should absolutely not do this. But if you are being told to leave the scene and you refuse to do so, I've seen hundreds of times where police officers will now arrest you for criminal trespassing, or if there's a criminal investigation going on, they'll claim you are now interfering with public duties. In the city of Chicago versus Morales, the United States Supreme Court addressed loitering laws, and they said how important it was that police officers needed to be very clear in their instructions. While the Supreme Court said that vague laws are unconstitutional, specific requests by police officers for people to disperse can be legal. So what do you do instead? Comply with the officer's order to leave, even if you believe it's unjust. Otherwise, get ready. That officer is likely going to arrest you. And now you have an unjust arrest on your record you'll have to try to get expunged later. Instead, pull out your phone. Record the entire interaction. Take that police officer's badge number and his name, and make sure and document as much of this as you can as soon as the incident is over. Then consult an attorney about that officer's behavior. Because you've documented everything and you have it all recorded, you may have a civil claim against that officer, but at a minimum, you can report them for their behavior. Just remember this important point that I echo to my clients all the time. The street is not the courtroom. Before I cover the next point, I want to stop and thank our sponsor of this video, MyHeritage, the leading global service for family history research and DNA testing. I was really excited about partnering with MyHeritage because I had gaps in my family tree, and there was stuff in my family's past that I just didn't know anything about. Not only does MyHeritage help you find out about your family's origins, they also provide you access to over 20 billion historical records and documents so that you can really dig deep to learn about your family history. Using their Instant Discoveries feature, I was able to find photos of family members I had no idea existed, and I was able to add them to my family tree. In fact, when you zoom out on your family tree, like I did, here I am, but notice what happens. You can literally go back generation after generation to not only see your grandparents, but your great-grandparents, all the way back to the 1700s for me. Using advanced AI technology, MyHeritage allows you to both color and animate historical photos. With tools like Instant Discoveries and Record Matches, you can easily find ancestors' historical records, and then with just the click of a button, you can add an entire group of relatives to your family tree. In fact, I found the final resting place of one of my relatives that I didn't even know about. So, if you're intrigued to learn more about your family and all the hidden treasures about your family history, sign up for the 14-day free trial from MyHeritage and learn about all the amazing benefits they have to offer. Sign up now by clicking the link down in the description section or in the tagged comment. Number 7, never make your comments to the police too personal. When tensions rise, it's tempting to make personal comments to the police, particularly if you know that they're mistreating you. Maybe the officer is just being aggressive or he's talking down to you. You know the temptation is going to be to snap back with an insult. Now look, the First Amendment does give you certain privileges to be able to speak your mind about things, and saying comments about the police can be one of them. But I want you to beware here. If cops can justify arresting you for saying something personal, you better believe they will. For example, I've seen thousands of videos, and I've seen people call cops fat, called them dumb, said that there's no way they could get a job doing anything else, or even worse, they make comments about their family members. But making it personal only escalates the situation, and now you're also tempting that police officer to turn around and use anything you say as a supposed threat, which now will justify that officer for arresting you for terroristic threat or some type of disorderly conduct. Will that actually hold up in court? Maybe not, but it's not going to save you from spending a night in jail, having to post bond, which is money out of your pocket, and now hire a lawyer to get your case dismissed. The best practice is to keep your comments to the situation at hand and not to the officer personally. Even better, say nothing. Exercise your right to remain silent. And now you're putting the pressure back on the cops to justify arresting you without any help from you. As a practical matter, telling the cop he's dumb or saying he's fat only leads to the officer being aggressive towards you. Save those issues. Don't make it personal. Leave the grievances for your lawyer to fight in court. Number 6, don't yell at the cops. I get it. Encounters with law enforcement can be extremely frustrating, especially when you know you've done nothing wrong. But raising your voice to the cops will be labeled as aggressive behavior in the police report. In fact, I've seen police officers interpret yelling as potentially threatening behavior, which then allows them to justify using force against you, which leads to additional charges and you spending the night in jail. What to do instead? Be as cool as a cucumber. Stay calm and speak clearly. In fact, you should probably exercise your right to remain silent, and you can do that by saying so politely and then remaining silent. Now look, I don't know about you, but I like being in control of a situation. By remaining calm and collected, and not raising your voice and yelling at the cops, you are actually maintaining control over the police officer. But the moment you raise your voice and you start yelling, you're actually serving up all the control and handing it over to the cops, and things get dangerous very quickly. You say, yeah, but Jeff, what if he's mistreating me? What if he's being aggressive to me? By choosing to lower your voice and remain calm, you're actually exposing the mistreatment by this police officer as it's being recorded, and you are looking like the professional and they are looking like the fool. Number 5, beware what happens if you ignore the cops. Imagine you're walking down the street. A police officer sees you. He then calls out to you, "Excuse me, sir, I need to speak to you now." You keep walking, pretending you didn't hear what he said. Now the officer starts walking quicker in your direction because he thinks you might be hiding something, and now he becomes suspicious. Unfortunately, ignoring a police officer's commands does not make them go away. I get it. You did nothing wrong. Why is this police officer bothering you? Walking away or refusing to acknowledge the police officer will make him think you're doing something criminal, which then leads the officer to believe you were evading arrest or detention, or worse, they could end up throwing you down to the ground. In fact, in Illinois versus Wardlow, the Supreme Court ruled that unprovoked flight upon noticing police officers can contribute to a reasonable suspicion for a stop. So what should you do instead? Acknowledge that the officer gave you a command, keep your tone of voice lower than his, listen to their instructions, but then immediately exercise your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, and then also exercise your Sixth Amendment right not to answer any questions until your attorney is present. If you continue to be detained, ask the officer, "Officer, am I free to go?" If they say no, re-exercise your Fifth Amendment and Sixth Amendment rights so that they cannot use anything you say or do against you. Number 4, never run from the cops when being detained or arrested. This may seem like common sense, but if you have been unfairly targeted by the police, your fight or flight instincts might kick in and you might feel justified to take off. Maybe you were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Maybe you were riding in a car or you were walking next to some friend of yours. They did something wrong and now the cops assume that you did it. Here's the thing to know. If you choose to take off, no matter your innocence, if you start running or you avoid the police, you're now going to be facing additional charges and you'll lose some of that credibility showing your innocence in court. In fact, in Terry versus Ohio, the Supreme Court ruled that police officers were allowed to briefly stop and detain someone if they had reasonable suspicion. But if you take off and you flee from a police officer, you've now turned reasonable suspicion into probable cause for your arrest. So what should you do? You should stay put, don't run, pull out your video, record the entire interaction, exercise your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent and your Sixth Amendment right to counsel, and don't say another word. I have seen so many cases where the accused was innocent and they were about to walk away untouched. And then all of a sudden they lost their cool and they lost everything. Never run by foot or by car. Number 1, you'll get caught. Number 2, the pain is always worse than staying put. And then number 3, you'll lose the credibility in court to show that that police officer was mistreating you or profiling you. And you want to be able to make sure you can clear your name. Number 3, never pull away from the cops or resist them if you're being illegally arrested. What if you're just standing there minding your own business? Then suddenly a cop walks up to you and grabs a hold of your arm. Your first reaction may very well be to pull away. and turn around and look at the cop and ask him what is his problem. But resisting physically can easily lead to the cop now being able to justify arresting you for either resisting arrest or, much worse, assault of a public servant, even if the arrest was unjustified. In Graham versus O'Connor, the Supreme Court emphasized that claims of excessive force are analyzed under the Fourth Amendment's, quote, objective reasonableness standard, not on the officer's intent. The point of the case? The more you resist, the less likely it will be that the court will find that the officer was acting unreasonable in his treatment towards you. Remember, the cop has the gun and the taser, not you. So here's what we do instead. We remain calm. We don't move. We document everything we can. We get badge numbers, IDs. If you have witnesses that are nearby, they need to pull out their phone, record the entire situation so that you can hold everyone accountable without you being alleged to have been resisting arrest or assaulting a public servant. Exercise your right to remain silent and make it very clear to this police officer you do not consent to a search of you or your property or anything else, and you will not answer any questions until you have your lawyer present. Your attorney can then use all of this information later in court to get your case thrown out and potentially a civil action against the police. You always have a better chance of getting even in court than you do resisting on the scene. Number 2, never get in a cop's face or push back. Picture this. A police officer walks up to you and he boldly claims he knows you committed a crime. You know you didn't do it. He then starts saying he's interviewed witnesses, he's gathered evidence you know doesn't really exist, and then he begins to tell you, if you don't admit and give him the information he needs right now, he will personally make sure it turns out bad for you. Then he does the worst thing of all. He gets up in your face and he threatens you. What do? I would say that police officer is trying to bait you into attacking him. Confronting an officer physically is a surefire way to not only escalate the situation, but a guarantee that you will be arrested because the officer was baiting you into the encounter. I have seen officers do this and then use even minor contact by you as a justification to now not only arrest you for assault, but start to use some pretty excessive force against you in the process. So what do instead? Always try to keep a safe distance between you and the officer and never respond with any physical contact. Even if the officer steps into your personal space, do not push back. I can guarantee you, any physical aggression on your part can and will be used against you. As hard as this may be to do, don't take the bait and push back or fight back against the police. If you do, you've given him exactly what he wanted, which is now a legal justification to not only arrest you, but use force against you in the process. Finally, number 1, never hold a weapon or anything that might seem like a weapon if a cop is approaching. This is the most critical mistake that can many times lead to fatal consequences. Holding anything that could be perceived as a weapon, a cell phone, a set of keys, or maybe even a wallet, can lead to fatal consequences if an officer perceives that you might have a weapon. I have actually seen victims of assault get shot by the police because when the cops show up, they are holding the weapon of the aggressor, and then the cops draw down on them and they end up getting seriously injured. In fact, in Tennessee versus Garner, the United States Supreme Court ruled that officers may use deadly force if they have probable cause to believe the suspect poses a significant threat of death or serious physical injury. For your safety, if you're holding anything metallic, like keys, tools, or anything else, make sure you put them down very slowly. Don't be holding any of this stuff when the cops show up. Always keep your hands visible and move very slowly when you do move. If you do happen to reach for something, always communicate to the officer before you move. Officer, I am reaching into my back pocket to grab my ID. And as you do that, do it very slowly. Remember the goal here. It's to survive the police encounter. Don't make these critical mistakes. One wrong move can have serious lifelong consequences when you encounter the police. Now, we covered what not to do when the cops show up. But did you know that cops have all sorts of tricks to get you in trouble? As the people's lawyer, I've seen them all. Check out this next video where I break down how you can outsmart the police when they pull out their bag of tricks. And don't forget, sign up for the 14-day free trial of MyHeritage to learn more about your family history. You'll be shocked to find out what you learn. See you over there.